What is good, clean food? And how does it affect your skin?
Could be a different definition depending on who you ask, but in general, good clean food is the food that you are used to ethnically, region wise, where you are. So your body over the time knows how to digest that. Depending on your skin type, get yourself a face wash, get yourself a moisturizer, get yourself a sunscreen. Beyond that, please ask your dermatologist.
What is the solution for dandruff? There are off-the-shelf
Anti-dandruff
shampoos. Anti-dandruff shampoo?
Yeah, off the shelf.
Any of
also
them?
you can take any of them. You only need an exfoliation after a certain age. Young skin, you exfoliate.
What is that certain age?
Depending on your ethnicity, depending on your ambient humidity, temperature, sun exposure, it could be anywhere upwards of 25. Excessive protein in any form, not just in protein bars and protein powders. You eat 10 chicken in a day, 10 egg whites in a day, it's very bad. Water is a beautiful hydrant. Not hours of water running, but that quick 2-second shower that you take is a beautiful hydrant. Over that, when you apply your night oils or your night creams, it's so much nicer and so much soothing.
How do you apply moisturizer adequately?
Like this. So that's the worst way that most people show you, that put it here, do this and put it off.
Dr. Lakshmi Shetty, the dermatologist to the stars.
Okay.
It's true though. You are the
Yes.
dermat to the stars. Thank you for speaking with me. We have so many questions that we're going to have to make chapters on this interview so that people can find the answers. It will be really long, but I'm effectively going to ask you everything I have wanted to ask up till now.
Okay.
Right, and some of them are going to be very obvious questions for you, but not for us. So to start with, right, the market for skincare and the market for, for derma products and for work that can be done has really gone through the roof in India.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what the different kinds of dermatologists in the market are and what are they qualified to do? Because obviously I have a rash, I have an eczema, the
Yeah.
actual doctor who is
Yeah.
attached to a hospital.
Yeah.
And then there are the people doing the fillers. And,
Yeah.
so what are these different types of qualifications?
Yeah. I like the way you said who's available in the market. So, okay. So since the question started from the aesthetic viewpoint,
Yes.
you have firstly make sure that you're going to a qualified doctor. Now, what does qualified doctor mean? An MBBS at least, which is the basic medical degree a doctor can have.
Who's been to medical school? Who is a
Has to
doctor?
be a medical
Yeah.
school, has to be a doctor.
Yes.
You do have other specialities such as BHMS, which is homeopathy. If there is an Ayurveda doctor, in the bracket they would have written Ayurveda. A lot of people would simply say doctor and they are not doctors. I know of a couple of people who say doctor. They are in the weight loss business. They call themselves doctor. But when you ask them what's their degree, it will be like online degree in Calcutta, and it will be a 6-month course, which is you're a doctor of naturopathy, which you're still calling yourself doctor. So you don't know what is that doctor. You're just seeing that she's a doctor. So please make sure your basic degree is MBBS at least. So when you have an MBBS and when you're in the aesthetic field, you call yourself a cosmetic physician or an aesthetic physician.
Okay.
So that is the basic that you need to look for. So they are qualified to do pretty much. See, there's no clear-cut distinction as to what each one is qualified to do, but they would be able to perform procedures such as Botox, fillers, your hair reduction lasers, your maybe other forms of skin tightening lasers. All of these can be done by an aesthetic practitioner or an aesthetic physician. Not a practitioner, sorry. Aesthetic practitioner could be anybody.
Right.
Aesthetic physician or a cosmetic physician. Then comes your dermatologist, who is a practicing dermatologist. Out of which some of them, every dermatologist for the basic knowledge can treat hair, skin and nail.
Okay.
So it's not that somebody calls themselves trichologist, there's no separate degree to it. It is the dermatology master's or degree that you do, board certification, your diploma, your master's in dermatology, postgraduate studies, which will equip you to treat hair, skin and nail. Okay? So that is that. There have been a lot of times patients come to me and say, oh, I went to this trichologist for hair care, while I know for years they've been coming to me for skin. I'm like, but I treat hair. They're like, really? We thought you only treat skin.
Yeah.
So this is a point that I wanted to clarify. 2, then you have so among these dermatologists, because dermatologists is a vast field.
Yes.
Like, for example, if you come to me with vitiligo, I may be able to treat a vitiligo which is less than maybe 10% of your body surface. A little patch here and a little patch here. But if you have a larger platform, larger a body area has been stable, then there are a lot of vitiligo surgeries.
Yeah.
Surgeries that they do to get back your pigment. There are certain doctors who specialize in that. Why is medicine called as a practice? Because it's what you practice, you keep getting better at, right? Law, medicine, a few things are called as practice. So each one of us take on to one thing very dearly, very passionately. Then you become really good at that. So there are certain people only doing vitiligo surgery. There are certain people doing only hair transplant surgery. They're also dermatologists, but they take on to that.
Yeah.
And they do that day in and day in and day in and day out. So if tomorrow I can do a hair transplant with a little bit of training, because I do have a basic education that requires me to do that, but I may not be as good as another doctor who's been doing
it for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. So like that. And then there's clinical dermatology, there's pediatric dermatology. So there are a lot of doctors who dedicate their life for pediatric dermatology. I don't treat pediatric dermatology. If I can't, I may not even be able to handle it. I refer it to another doctor. My passion, my expertise has always been aesthetics, procedural aesthetics. When you say aesthetics, a lot of things come into it, right? So it's not just the aesthetics. So clinical dermatology aesthetics also have a lot of fine line, like an acne or pigmentation. You need to go to a dermatologist so that they can actually diagnose and understand deep why is your pigmentation. Rather than just saying, oh, pigmentation, let's do peel and laser. So you need to treat the cause of the pigmentation and cause of the acne, cause of the eczema. So that's why you go to a dermatologist in such cases as against a physician. So these are ways. Then you have a plastic surgeon who can cut and do things. So if you have a blepharoplasty, a bag under the eye, for example, a lot of loose skin on your neck, no matter how many energy-based devices, I can't do this to your neck. So that excess skin has to be cut, taken away. That a surgeon will do. A cosmetic surgeon or a plastic surgeon can also do cosmetic procedures. A cosmetic surgeon sometimes could be an ENT or an opthal who would have again done a fellowship in facial plasty. So they only do face surgery. But a plastic surgeon is someone who does reconstructive surgery in case of your burns, accidents, anything. So it's a much more wider, more sophisticated education. So this, by and large, is the wide variety that is in India. Abroad, it's even worse because you have nurse practitioners, aesthetic practitioners. They call themselves something else also. So many other things who come into the bad background of I can also inject.
Yes.
But luckily, that's not in India.
That's not
People
in
have
India.
kept in guard
Yeah.
very well.
What is your area of specialization and what is that entail?
So I am a dermatologist, and my area of special interest and therefore special multiple extras that I learn and now that I teach globally, so you keep picking more, is aesthetic dermatology, like I said, which includes your hair diseases, hair fall, your baldness, your eczemas, your acne, your pigmentation. But mainly what I am known best for is the facial transformation of the form of the face, the fillers, the Botoxes, the energy-based devices, because I give the most natural results. So you can say, if I end up treating and the people ask, usually they end up saying, oh, yoga or sandalwood paste. So I'm the biggest unsung hero ever.
Because you're really happy. Patients will never acknowledge that you've done any work.
Initially, it used to hurt, but now I'm used to it.
Okay, so I want to come to the fact that you specialize in aesthetics, so fillers and Botox to basically improve the measurements, the contours of people's faces. Is that correct? What is in the filler?
Okay.
What was that material made of?
It's like the jelly in your eye, the jelly in your skin, the jelly that lubricates your joint.
Okay.
All that is called as hyaluronic acid, which is the ground substance in your skin. Like you call it a GAG, glycosaminoglycans. These are all a set of ground substance in your skin. So it's literally like a water jelly. That is what is in the filler. Now, filler is so highly specific in hyaluronic acid, and it is what is taken out from a bacteria grown on a petri dish. This particular thing does not have species specificity. which means to say I can pull it out from a dog, put it to me, from mine to a pig, pig to a cow, cow to a chimpanzee. You to me, obviously. So I could do it to anyone because this is the innate nature of that material.
Okay.
So it's inert, it doesn't react, it doesn't harm you, it quietly sits where you put it. If it is put by an expert in the right plane, in the right way, it quietly sits where it is been put. It's like a clay mold. You're putting clay and just saying, okay, she doesn't have cheek, let me put a little clay cheek under her. Imagine that. So that is a filler. You have a deep line, let me just put a little line of clay under that. The deep line becomes a little, it'll come up. Lips are not really nice, let me put a little clay under that and make it proper. Now that clay, if you give to an amateur, he can just do pachki fight.
Yeah.
It's like a clay in an amateur's hand while you give it to probably I don't know who's the biggest clay maker. Clay artist, but let's say Picasso for simply. So if you give it to him, he'll create something beautiful. So it's like that. It's simply an inert putty-like material in your hand.
And once this thing is injected into your face, where does it go? I mean, does it
sits
always sit there forever?
It doesn't sit
Does
there
it
forever.
need to be refreshed? Does it
No.
move around?
So it doesn't sit there forever because
Okay.
there is an enzyme called hyaluronidase in our body, which is a natural enzyme that keeps breaking it down. So is there a time period in which it will break down? Yes. Usually, if you see the company brochures, depending on the cross-linking, which is so pure hyaluronic acid will be broken down in 24 hours.
Okay.
Because hyaluronidase just attacks it and it's gone. But if you have cross-linking in it, which means to say there are some protein bits attached to make them sit strong, depending on the cross-linking, depending on the weight of the hyaluronic acid in it, the molecular size of the hyaluronic acid in it, it takes time to degrade. So some companies, depending on what they have put in, will say 3 months. It will be on the box inside whatever is written. Some will be 6 months, some will be 1 year, some will be 2 years. But there are recent studies which have shown that once you put it inside, the company may say what they want to say, but the body doesn't fully degrade. So we have seen with studies of people who have injected 20 odd years ago, still retaining hyaluronic acid inside. So which means to say, to answer your question, does it fully go away? It may never fully go away. Okay. So therefore, when I do fillers on my patients, I keep telling them, on the box it says 1 year, but when I do fillers, I have seen it kind of lasts for at least 3 to 5 years.
So Botox and fillers are two different things.
Yes, they are. So like I said, your filler is very, very inert. It's like a clay, like a putty. I'll put it in like a good boy, it'll sit there if I put it in right. While Botox is a very common name, it's like a Xerox, very common name. And it's one company which makes the toxin.
Okay.
So botulinum A toxin it is. So it is a toxin that is that paralyzes. But I don't want to use such a strong term and scare people away. So this was what when you ate paralyzed the gut. So gut mobility was not there, and then you died due to various reasons of muscle not moving, whether smooth muscles not moving. So when you give these little doses in a controlled manner, in a very purified manner, into certain muscles that we call it as mimicking muscles, the muscles which cause action, that releases those muscles. So there's a nerve releases acetylcholine. This is a muscle. Muscle has a receptor to acetylcholine. And when the acetylcholine is received and this guy says, oh, nerve is telling me to contract, I will contract. What if I make this connection weak? That's all is what the toxin is doing, making that connection weak. New connection will establish. That's how the body is. And that's why Botox doesn't last. It wears off in 3 months. So, and it is not fully paralyzing if you don't want to. With the dose, I can just ease. Now, I have Botoxed my frown lines because I don't like my frown lines. But am I not able to move? I am, because I've kept it so easy. I like it to be natural. So I've used a less dose. Disadvantages, instead of 3 months, I have to inject myself every 2 months. Sometimes I may not. Like now it's been 6 months since I've injected, but I've been injecting regularly. So my muscles are eased off. The line hasn't etched. So it's okay. So there are a lot of actors where I have to give them the ability to express and emote.
Yes, because that's the job.
Correct. But they don't want it so exaggerated that it sees as multiple lines. So we ease that. So that's where you can literally play with it like math. You exactly know. If I -1, this is what will happen. If I +1, this is what. And this muscles also you play. Now, if I want to get an arch of the brow, I know what to knock to get a nice arch. The same thing, if I knock a little more here, then I'll have a flat. I won't be able to get my arch. So that's the way you play around to do what you want to do with both these tools. This fabulous tools. I love them. So
Obviously.
yeah.
So you're telling me, so for people who get this work done,
Yeah.
it has to be refreshed every few months.
Yes, which is
Okay.
actually a boon.
And how expensive is this on an average?
Expense is a relative term, isn't it? Yes, I mean, it's not. In today's day, I don't think it's very expensive. Like, for example, if you just want a brow to be lifted off, I hate this when this brow falls as we grow older. It just, the tail seems to just get under. So just to get your brow open. So even the eye feels a little open. Or as you grow older, the corner of the mouth goes down. See, I'm not able to do that because I've Botoxed. So if you were to just Botox a little, a muscle called DAO, which kind of keeps pulling this down, maybe, I don't know, maybe 10,000 rupees,
Okay.
maybe even less. That's it. So it's not horrendously expensive. Having said that, this I'm saying is small indications with small amount of drug required. But if you need a whole load, like for example, there's a muscle called platysma here, which starts from here to here, just pulls the whole damn face down. So it's a downward pulling muscle, and you don't want your jaw under constant downward pull. So I knock that platysma off to give you a good face neck definition, plus a no tug to your lower face. Now for that, I need 60 to 80 units at times.
Oh,
So then it's multiples of how many units you use.
right.
There
But
are
it's
certain countries.
mostly accessible for most people.
Yeah, yeah. Come on. Yes.
There is a lot of also now, we see it on social media, where there are these measurements
Ayo, I
that
hate
people
it.
have for faces.
I
Saying, this
hate
is where your eyebrows should be, this is where your cheekbone should be, this is where your lips should be.
Imagine.
And that's the perfect face. And now everyone has the same face, or everyone ideally should have the same face. What's your response to that?
Elon Musk derived. What is he doing now? Some robots he's doing, right? So all of us will be like that, walking one day exactly met to the measurement.
Yeah.
No, I hate that. I've never used those calipers which they're using to measure. I've never sat and said, this is a measurement that we need to do. You know, there are companies who also teach you to say, point injections like this. Everybody's face, we will do this point, 3 point here, 4 point here. I'm like, no. I've in fact lost huge amount of teaching assignments which pays us millions of dollars because I refuse to teach that way.
Okay.
So it's not, how would you want to template? Like, I love your eyes. I love your mouth, your smile. You have lovely eyebrows, which naturally all of us Mangaloreans have an arch. So I'm like, imagine if I were to measure it all and bring it to something, where is you then?
Yeah.
Where's how do you find you attractive or she not attractive? I'm not saying not attractive, sorry. She differently attractive. Her eyes attractive, your smile attractive, her nose attractive. How would you even differentiate, isn't it? You take away that spark from someone's face.
Yeah. And I think that, as young people, when we are teenagers, we'll all have portions of your face or your body that you dislike, right? You're like, oh my God, I don't like my nose. I don't like my eyebrows. I remember I used to be teased about the fact that I had a very large nose.
Really?
Yeah. Or maybe I grew into this. Grew
Yes, grew to match the nose.
And it was really, it's my dad's nose. My dad has the same nose. And now my son has the same nose.
Oh.
And I was looking at him the other day and saying, I can no longer hate my nose.
Yeah.
Because then I'd also have to hate his nose.
My God.
Because you're passing on that insecurity. Because, and when you go in and change portions of your face, then
What are you telling your son?
what are you telling your child? Are you saying that, hey, there are
I don't
portions
like
of your
you. Wait
face?
for you to grow up. I'll change that also.
Yeah, or for whatever. I just
In his
feel
head,
that
that's what he'll be thinking,
I feel
right?
that these insecurities that we have of our genetic details will then.
Oh, well put. Faye.
Yeah.
Love you. I mean, I could never put it like this.
Yes.
You put it so well. Ethnically, genetically, we have certain things which make us us
Yes.
and which make us special. And I think we should wear them with pride. I am not saying, if you have this, there's so much variation. Obviously, not all Mangaloreans have aquiline nose or features.
Yes.
Some of us do have it differently. You want to address it, something which is absolutely sticking out on your face, of course, go ahead and do it. And when you want to do it, like I said, seek the right expert. But not everything has to fit to a measurement. That is all is what we are trying to say. Like how you said, your face grew into your nose and now the nose doesn't look so big. A lot of times young kids come to me and say, my cheeks are too full. And I keep telling them, you're young. That is why the cheek here is full. That's a chubby cheek of a child. Your upper cheekbone is not emerged out of that face yet. Hold on. You grow fully. That will emerge out and this will then automatically look slimmer. That baby chub will go. And they'll say, oh, my jawline is not as sharp. No, because you're still a baby. Let that go. The jawline will emerge out of that face. It'll come. Wait. So that's exactly when you said, my face grew into my nose. It'll grow into something. So till around 20, 25, maybe even 30, and you come to your ideal weight, allow it to all set in. And then see if you really need huge manipulations. But yes, ethnically, for example, as Indians, we have an under eye area which is more retrusive. We have chin, which we call it as micrognathia, and retrognathia, which means it's a little behind and small. Then probably a Western face would be with a more robust jawline and big chin.
And cheekbones.
Strong chin and strong chin.
I mean, we're from Karnataka. We'd call it tatte idli, which is like
Round and flat.
Big round flat idli. This is what it is. Take it and go and draw on it. So, so I used to always joke about the fact that, that the face that a child makes, right? Just round, two eyes.
One nose,
So that's my face.
Full bone face.
Which, I think it was Maya Angelou, who's, an American poet, was an American poet, we've lost her now, who used to say that when you walk into a room, walk in with a straight back because you're taking all your ancestors with you. All the fight of your ancestors, all the power of your ancestors you're taking with you. And I see in our genetics, you're carrying your ancestors with you. You're carrying their history, you're carrying their genetics, you're carrying their fight and their power with you. And so there's a lot of power in that you will then pass on to your children. And there is a need to sort of acknowledge, to love it, to be real about it.
Of course, my favorite person on all earth is my papa. No, Uppu, you're my favoritist. That's my daughter.
That's your daughter, yes.
Yeah. But now when I walk in somewhere and they say, oh my God, you look exactly like Rai uncle, Rai Baba, Rai. As a maiden, I'm Rai and Papa is Mr. Rai, S. and Rai. I feel so much joy and pride. And I'm thinking, had I altered things and nobody recognized me, how it would be.
Now we have young girls, and I was reading about this, buying active ingredients and putting on their faces at 9, 10, 11. What age do you think skincare should really begin? Because we start them off like on baby soap, using like baby things, right? But now because of social media, a lot of them are going to the Sephoras of the world, and like it's actually I read an article called the Sephorization of preteens.
Yes.
What's happening? And are you noticing that as well?
So a cousin of mine came and asked me. He said, sorry, I'm going to do this. I know it's a Sunday and you hate talking work, but my daughter is bringing work. I'm like, what is this? She's 13. She brought a bag full of things. And that was the list she had chosen and given to her dad when he went abroad. From Sephora in London, I want And he says, when I went there, they asked me also, is it a teen child? So I'm like, what's happening? That's the first time I got exposed to that. I'm like, what's happening? She had a scrub. I'm like, why do you need a scrub? She's like, because I have to exfoliate. Exfoliate what? So basically, for all the teens listening, what is exfoliation? For example, if you take that one concept, exfoliation is you trying to get rid of the dead skin which is sitting on the top. A dead skin sitting on the top will also sit with clumped melanin. So it does two things. One, it makes you look a shade probably duller. Two, it also makes you look a little dry. Three, it's a great barrier. So it won't allow any cream that you're putting to penetrate in. Having said that, it's a great barrier for your sun rays as well. Sun harm from sun rays. So it's good and bad barrier. So it's a barrier. Now this barrier has its own physiological way of growing to the top and falling off. So it takes averagely a month for it to grow and fall off, which it does beautifully on its own. But the day you start growing older, cells slow down. Your own capacity physiologically of throwing out the dead cell becomes slower. That is when you need assistance from outside. That's why you only need an exfoliation after a certain age. Young skin you exfoliate.
What is that certain age?
Depending on your ethnicity, depending on your ambient humidity, temperature, sun exposure, it could be anywhere upwards of 25.
Okay.
So, as a child, when you exfoliate, what happens is it's a beautifully hydrated, well kept skin with good gloss, which is because of your own skin's fat and skin's oils. And it has great set of, like the probiotic in the gut, there is also probacteria on your skin, which is good commensal bacteria, which is keeping your skin intact. You're going and scrubbing out your barrier so hard. You're causing aberration, you're causing barrier damage, you're causing irritation of the skin, you're inviting allergies, you're inviting eczema, you're inviting dry skin, you're inviting sensitive skin. Why would you want that? So that's the first thing. Actives for a teenager, absolutely not. Because again, what are actives? It is either supplementing, complementing something, or protecting something. At this age, your skin is so beautiful, barrier is so intact, it's protecting itself, you really don't need anything. And you haven't started a problem. Why are you having an active to tackle what goal, what problem? The goal is to have young skin, which you have right now.
Yeah.
So what are you even reaching out to, or to what end? So I think it's all you need as a young kid is hygiene. So get the right face wash. You may be born with a dry skin or an oily skin, so get the right face wash. You could use the same face wash maybe for your body or body face wash, whatever. So get a nice cleansing, basically, I'm saying. Then you make sure your scalp is very clean, but that influences the skin a lot. So your scalp is not only on the face, but on your back and your butt as well, and on your shoulder as well. So make sure your scalp clean is super clean. And then you need a good moisturizer as a protectiveness, as constantly healing and taking care of your barrier. Because having said that, there is still pollution, there is still oxidative damage, there is still ozone layer which is gone now. So there's a lot of damage, pollution happening. So you use a moisturizer. Third thing that you can introduce is a sunscreen. If you really have a harsh skin, you're playing sports, you're running around, you're going out, then you can introduce a sunscreen as well. That is it. Oil bathing once in a week or whatever, the good old days like the way we did, that's skincare. Showering at night, that is skincare. Washing your hands clean and not touching your face, that is skincare. That's all. Good food, that is skincare. Cut out junk, that is skincare.
I have so many questions. Okay, one by one. Good food. We've had this conversation so many times that a lot of, and people react differently. Some people are okay with lactose and milk, some people are not. Some people are okay with like gluten and wheat, some people are not. So what is good clean food and how does it affect your skin?
So there's a gut skin axis. Yeah, so whatever affects your gut definitely affects your skin. Okay. Now, what is good clean food? Could be a different definition depending on who you ask. But in general, good clean food is the food that you are used to ethnically, region-wise, where you are. So your body over the time knows how to digest that. It's like, I know how to operate a laser machine. Tomorrow you give me a lathe machine, I don't know how to do with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's what your body, your mind knows to operate. It knows to operate. So it kind of knows to operate. Any food that you end up taking should not be processed. When I say processed, already, for example, rice is polished.
Yes.
Let's say it is processed. That's minimal processing which you need to bring from growth to where you consume. But further processing, inducing chemicals into it, mixing a few things, preservatives like a cheese.
Basically as close to single ingredient as we can get.
Yeah. Single ingredient, least processing as you can get. Home food, if you can, which is great, which itself has become a rarity now. Isn't it? All of us are always doing something or going out. So to me, home food as much as possible. Even in the home food, sometimes you use those masala cubes, garam masalas. You're killing the food or polluting the food already to make it as processed as something that you may get outside. So you have to be very mindful when we say ghar ka khana. Ghar ka khana with 10 of the wrong ingredients is not going to do good to you. But there are these days very good restaurants which serve very clean food. Even that's okay. So clean food with less masala, less process, less things. a way to find out what is, like you said, some people react to this, some people react to that, right? A way to find out, not everybody is allergic to lactose. Not everybody is allergic or I won't say allergic, sorry, wrong word, intolerant. Not everybody is intolerant to a particular food. Yes. How would you make out a simple way that I keep saying is maintain a food journal? You write down for a week everything that went to your mouth, including the type of tea you have. Like I have a jasmine tea one day, I have a rose tea one day. So you need to know what tea. I figured out my worst enemy is chamomile tea.
Really?
Yeah. I get
what a chiparustam.
Yeah. Would you ever think?
Yeah.
Like a chamomile tea, I thought was relaxing me in the night, and I was getting tight, bloated. I hated it. I hated the way my skin became dry the next day. Then sometime I said, whoa, chamomile tea. Cut it down, and yes, my life was good. And my mom had this weird allergy, and it was all skin turning dark for a long time. We all thought innumerable, I saw it, my colleagues saw it. We just couldn't pinpoint what it was. One fine day, my younger sister saw in something and came and told my mom, every morning she used to have this methi ka pani. You know how a lot of our elders do it?
Yes.
Methi pani. She just said methi is apparently really an allergen, stimulant. So she just stopped that. Lo and behold, her skin cleared up. So sometimes, like you said, it'll be that one chuparustum. You won't know who that guy is. So to figure that out is where you maintain a food diary. Write it down, and then you definitely will see a pattern. What easiest way to instantly know is what makes you feel bloated.
Yeah.
What makes you feel burpy? What makes you feel tight in the tummy that you can't move? Or the next day your eczema becomes more. If you have those cuts in your hand, that eczema becomes more. Or you have an acne popping out. So all of these are quick indications if something is not doing well for you. So you know that. Cut them out. You cut them out for a week or 2 weeks and see. Then if that is the right answer, you know, whoa, this is right. So it's elimination, inclusion, elimination, inclusion. You will find what is the guy who is irritating you. Then you just have to eliminate them. Sometimes eliminate them totally for 3 to 4 months. Slowly reintroduce. Maybe your body by then will forget that ingredient and forget to hate it. So it'll incorporate it.
I know the ingredient you hate most of all. Sugar.
Yes.
Is sugar the enemy? For like blanket for everyone?
Yeah. See, I don't
It's
want
not
to
a
say,
question of suits one person,
no,
suits another person.
I don't want you to say sugar. I want you to say sweet.
All sweet.
Yeah, because I say no sugar. Yes, doctor, I've cut sugar. I'm like, but why is your skin still reacting this way? And I'm thinking. But I'm now using stevia, but I'm using honey, but I'm using jaggery.
It's all the same thing.
No, anything that can spike your sugar instantly, stay sweet to your tongue, will cause release of insulin. You keep spiking, insulin keeps releasing. After some time, your body doesn't know how to respond to that insulin, and insulin is now secreted sitting there. So you call it a condition called insulin resistance. That is what triggers your diabetes. That is what triggers your skin pigmentation. That is what triggers your PCOS. That insulin resistance triggers a lot of things.
But forgive me. So there's sucrose, which is straight up sugar. There's fructose.
There's also sugar
There's
only.
lactose.
Sugar only.
Then there's all your starches.
Sugar only.
Rice, your atta.
Starch is more slow releasing sugar.
Okay.
The rest are spikes. Now, even in rice, there are various forms, black, red, blue, whatever rices are there, right? Hey, there is a blue rice.
There is a blue rice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So each one has different index,
Yes.
glycemic index. So it's called as glycemic index. So Google search, you will know the glycemic index of various rice. And then you go to the least, to my mind, red rice, what we eat, is the least glycemic index and most hardest to digest.
Parboiled
anything,
rice.
Yeah, anything which is, I may be wrong, nutritionist. If not, please comment and tell them the right thing. I'm saying in general, anything difficult to digest is low in glycemic index.
This can actually, you said based on what you genetically, ethnically we were raised on, but as we get older, sometimes your body changes and starts rejecting things.
Can change. Can. It's like developing an allergy. All my life I ate bhindi. Now I can't eat bhindi. Many people come and tell me. You can grow an allergy to anything. Body can de-recognize anything at any point of time. So that can happen. Intolerance, allergies can start at any point of life.
And it's your body sending a signal to your face saying you're putting something in here that's not working.
It could send it to your face, it could send it to your hair, it could send it to some itchy patch somewhere, like I said. It could be anywhere. It will tell you. If you carefully listen to your body, you don't need a doctor.
That's a dangerous statement.
Yeah.
You don't need a dermatologist, you don't need a doctor at all.
only. No, so I think what is all this meditation that people say? To me, you sit in the morning quietly and be one with your body. And I'm sounding like Sadhu Rashmi, but
Indian Medical Association's going to get in touch.
Say, please, IDVL, don't gut me down. So you kind of be one with the body and you actually will recognize what is saying what to you. You know, your joints are aching, they are tight. You know the inflammation of your body is high.
Yeah.
You know either it is food or it is lack of mobility or it is some water retention. And where is water retention coming? Usually from inflammation or stasis of water in your body because either the lymphatics are not working well or the muscle is not used, so it's not pumping it back. So you can figure out your body. So you just have to be very aware. Be very aware. You will know.
You did say shower at night. A lot of people don't shower at night. How important is it to shower at night?
It's okay if you don't sweat at all and if you're sitting in an AC the whole day. You don't need to shower at night. It's fine. You know, we are in a different lifestyle condition right now. For example, in the olden days, if we showered twice because there was no AC then and we are more physically active.
Working in
then.
the fields all day.
You were working in the fields, plus we were more physically. Even if you were a doctor, you maybe walked to your dispensary. Dispensary is hot. You came back, you touched 85 people. You came back and somebody said Akshi on your face. So what that happened? Right now, people have etiquette. It's Akshi. So a lot of things have changed, right? On a lighter note as well. So you may not need to have a bath at night, but it's nice to have a rundown at night for two reasons. One, of course, you take the day off. You take the pollution off. You take your skincare off. A lot of us put a lot of skincare even on your body, maybe. You take the skincare off. And two, water is a beautiful hydrant. Not hours of water running, but that quick 2-second shower that you take is a beautiful hydrant. Over that, when you apply your night oils or your night creams, it's so much nicer and so much soothing. And two, you use a little salt to rub on your joints. If it is achy breaky, then you have a little warm shower. That will also kind of is de-stressing. Inflammation goes down with these things. So it really helps at calming and relaxing a little warm shower for a lot of people. For a reason, it just calms your nerves down. So I think it's a good to have thing. If you have skin conditions such as eczema, extremely dry skin, it's a must have. Okay. But remember, please, only 2-second shower. Do not stand under a shower. In fact, a lot of people with eczema always tell them the first thing you need to give up is shower. You take a bucket bath and give up shower completely. 2 buckets of water, 1 spoon of oil in each of that bucket, lukewarm water, not too cold, not too hot. Just change that one thing in your life, the way you bathe, and cut down sugar and maybe also dairy. And you will see your eczema goes down drastically.
There were, traditionally, we have a lot of sort of skincare things that get recommended, right?
Yeah.
Haldi.
Especially we Mangaloreans.
Yes. Curd.
My mama
coconut
will
oil.
catch me and put things on the face.
Things on the face. You know, chandan, multani mitti. Different people use different things. Aloe vera. And now we have this whole, like, you do your active ingredients, you do your serum, you do your something else, and some 4 or 5 stages. What do you recommend? Do all of these home remedies work?
Yes.
And should all of us after a certain age be using active ingredients and retinol and all of these things?
No. There is no one for all rule at all in life. It's like how one food doesn't suit one and the other. Exactly the same for skincare also. Now, what is skincare? When you say skincare, people take it loosely as how many layers on the face. To me, like I said, for teenagers, even for the adults, skincare remains the same. Care for your skin, which starts from your gut, your lifestyle, your hygiene, your discipline. All of that is skincare. Skin is just but a diagnostic tool for what's happening inside your body. So skincare is body care, lifestyle care. Then on the skin, what do you do? Are, let's say 2-3 things if you want to divide. One, what you do at home. What you do at home could be doctor prescribed, over-the-counter bought things, or what mama said, which is at home things. So 3 things, largely loosely. So does things at home work? Yes, it works. Malai on a dry skin works beautifully well because malai is cream of milk. It's a complete food if you see. Like
Yeah.
it's got water, it's got oils, it's got proteins in it. So all of this together, or a condensed milk or a milk, is great to apply on the face just as a rejuvenating thing, just as a little bit of you apply curd, there's lactic acid in it. So you have beautiful, brightening of the skin with hydration if you need. Like you said, multani mitti, all of our Mangaloreans, chandan, haldi is something that we always use.
Coconut oil.
Coconut oil.
Yeah.
Now, chandan, haldi, all of this also has skin brightening properties. They also can take away a little bit of excessive oil. Your coconut oil has also. So I was on the scientific panel of Parachute for a long number of years. So therefore, though I am a medical doctor, we did a lot of. I was privy to a lot of research that happened with coconut oil. So we know that it has bacteriostatic properties also.
What does that mean?
So, which means it can halt the excessive growth of wrong bacteria. It can halt the growth of bacteria. It can halt the growth of fungus, halt the growth of virus on your face. Plus, it's the shortest chained oil. So, it can actually penetrate your skin and give you the hydration that the skin requires and the hair requires. So, like that, all these things that we did at home has a science. It's like haldi, which we applied all our life. Today's come in the form of curcumin. What is it? It's haldi. You're giving a more bioavailable, more purified form, minus the color of the haldi, is what we get in our cosmeceuticals, right?
Okay.
One of my patients, I learn a lot from my patients many a times. So there's this patient who travels a lot. One day got me saying that this is the rage in the US. Horrendously expensive thing in a bottle. What is it? Kesar oil. And we, as Indians, knew kesar all the time and put it in drinking, eating, applying everywhere. So like that, there is a lot of intelligence in what our mamas taught. And yeah, it helps.
What is retinol and who should use it?
So, so there are a lot of newer papers coming in that retinol, when you overuse it, it kind of stimulates your skin to such an extent that inflammation increases because of that. And MMPs, what we call it, is matrix metalloprotease, they start to kind of become more, which then lead to more inflammation. And it causes more harm than help if you use high grade for a long term on a very thin skin. And we are that. We are thin skin, though we are not necessarily European. Our skin is not very thick. It's a thin skinned thing. We are more, not very oily skin like the darker skin type. We are a little more less oilier skin type. And there's a lot of inflammation already. And there are too many actives that today's people are already putting on the skin. There's pollution leading to inflammation. Over that, you're irritating the skin. For what joy? No need. If you have to use the lower grade or precursor of this, which is much more easy on the skin. Plus, a lot of these formulated creams don't have just the retinols. They also have their some peptides in combination, something like a licorice, to fortify and ease this also. And the way that liposomal delivery systems. So it doesn't irritate, it still penetrates, it still does your job. So allow your doctor to prescribe it depending on your skin type, your lifestyle, all of that. Don't just buy it over the counter and think one ingredient is good. Retinol is still a complex ingredient, you're asking me. People think vitamin C is okay. Right? Everybody can apply vitamin C. What is vitamin C in the end of the day? It is ascorbic acid. It's acid at the end of the day. So if you have a skin which is already irritated, red, not so happy, and you put vitamin C and you say, oh, vitamin C doesn't suit my skin, it's irritating. Obviously, it's irritating. You shouldn't have simply put it.
So effectively, you're saying no active ingredient unless a doctor has given you
Yes,
something.
please.
Okay.
Another very
Chandan,
common.
everybody can use.
Chandan, everybody use. Coconut oil, everybody use.
can use.
Milk, everybody use. That, everybody use. Like the other common ingredient, since we're talking, is hyaluronic acid. What do you think hyaluronic acid does?
I don't know. What does it do?
What do you think glycolic acid does? All of these are supposedly
Stimulate your skin. to
hydrates your skin.
Okay.
Okay. They say this is for dry skin. Hyaluronic acid, oh my God, dry skin does wonders. It doesn't. You put hyaluronic acid on a super dry skin with a damaged barrier, it will only irritate your skin. So please don't go by common things which are said on the internet, because that is common knowledge. You need to go to an expert to understand the nuances of it and the specificities of it. So yes, no act. Only thing you can put is Pond's cold cream, Nivea cold cream or soft cream, CeraVe gentle cream, whatever. All of these basic categories of cold creams and creams is what you can put without a doctor's prescription. Sunscreens can be used maybe. It's easy today. You can see skin type for dry for thing they'll give you. Get a face wash maybe without doctor's recommendation. That also, if it's too harsh, may irritate you. But like I said, today it's easy to read. You don't have to read the label. You just have to say for what skin will be written there. So depending on your skin type, get yourself a face wash, get yourself a moisturizer, get yourself a sunscreen. Beyond that, please ask your dermatologist.
There's also a question about protein powders, right? Because in India now there's this whole, like, you go to the gym, you need to have more protein. We're not having enough protein in our diets, and there are a lot of protein powders. There've been some research about the fact that the labeling of these protein powders is not accurate. It's still an unnatural thing that I'm putting into my system, as opposed to just eating the food instead. Does it show up on our faces?
But I go back to say that, like you said, food itself, and I said how not enough for the nutritional benefits, so also not enough for your protein
needs. Okay.
needs of the day. Again, there's no that much protein in everything that you're eating. So you could have protein to eat if you want to, if you're in the muscle building phase.
But is it bad for our skin?
Excessive protein in any form, not just in protein bars and protein powders. You eat 10 chicken in a day, 10 egg whites in a day, it's very bad. So there was a phase where a lot of gym instructors used to tell them to eat 20 egg whites in a day.
Yes.
4 morning, 4 evening, 4 night. I'm like, excessive protein generates excessive inflammation. If for a normal layman, excessive heat. That is going to transform into acne on the face, acne on the back, red inflamed skin, eczema exacerbation, hair fall, all of that.
What's the limit?
1 to 1.5 grams per kg body weight is what you need. So you sit and measure. Instagram today is such a great tool. You say, ande mein kitna? I think it is 4 or 6 grams. Somebody can research and throw it back. 4 or 6 grams is in one egg. So you do that multiple. So you divide some in eggs. You divide some in fish, chicken, maybe paneer, maybe pulses, maybe legumes. So you figure out. And then there are hidden proteins. Like an apple, you can't dissect and say, I won't have an apple, but I'll have 2 ounces of vitamin A, 3 ounces of vitamin C, 4 ounces of this, and it can't become apple. We have understood this much about food. There is so much more about food. So you still, whole food has so many hidden proteins which we may not know. So what I tell most of my patients is just have 1 gram per kg body weight, which should be enough. The rest you'll get it in a hidden format. That's number 1. 2, you divide that and you see how much is coming in the food. Then the deficit little, the days that you work out, you may have a little. Out of that also try and have vegan protein. Okay. So it's most natural, plant-based, vegan protein. So it's easy to digest. Anything that is easy to digest, like I keep saying, will be less inflammatory for the body. Protein is tough to digest, therefore it is more inflammatory. Therefore it gives you more fullness for a longer time because it is tough to digest. So you eat it in that proportion.
Okay, so putting on makeup and taking off makeup, right? So 2 rounds of cleansing, 3 rounds of cleansing. How do you actively, like, correctly take off your makeup before you go to bed every day?
Depends on how much you've put on your skin, number 1. 2, depends on where all you've been in the day. If you have been on the roads, if you've been in the dust, the muck, the rain, then obviously you need more to remove. If you've got too many layers of makeup, obviously you have more to remove. You have an oily skin, then the makeup actually sits and becomes more sticky on the skin. So you may need more to remove. So all these are, and if the makeup has stayed the whole day, you may need more to remove. So these are all few things where you will see how much you will need to remove. Now, what are the methods of removal? You either have oils. Simply use an oil and just remove it in a piece of cotton. Everything emulsifies really well and it comes out. And after you do that, then you wash it off with a face wash. You're done. It could be specified makeup removing oil. It could be simply coconut oil. It could be, you get those emulsion oils, which is oil turns into a little lather when you wash it off. So you do both together. It's biphasic. You finish both together. Or then you want to get a little more sophisticated and you say, I don't want to use oils because my skin doesn't react well to oil for whatever reason. Maybe it's an oily skin. Maybe it's oil you don't like the smell of oil. then you could use the micellar water, where the West pronounces it as micellar water. So you can end up using that. Again, different companies are making that. You just take it in a piece of cotton, let the thing sit in for a second, you remove it all, and that's gone. Or you simply, if it is very less makeup, not too sticky, nothing, then you can simply use the right kind of face wash. You don't need hajar things. But if you do have tough things like a eyeliner, a mascara, all of that, then you may need a certain micellar water on the certain portions only.
But they also say that sometimes, just that cotton rubbing action is
Very bad. I'll
pulling
tell
and
you how
bad
to
for your
remove
skin.
it also.
Yeah.
So these are ways of removing. There is also newer thing called as take the day off balms. So it's more balm in nature. So you put that and then you massage it. You remove it in the same way. So these are different kinds. Now the fourth or fifth, whatever, I lost the number, kind is where you don't use any of the products. So you're not the ones who are more conservative and earth friendly people want to use something that you're not consuming, right? So you use washcloths. You get the makeup removing cloth these days, which is some specialized fabric where it really takes off your makeup very well. You wash it and you reuse it the next day. So these are various gadgets to remove it. Now, what's the right way of removing? Rightly, you said you do this and you keep rubbing. I see people just rub and rub and rub in the eye makeup, especially. That causes more damage, irritation to the skin. Skin becomes too dry. There's a lot of darkness around this eye, which starts forming because you've ruptured the fine vessels around the eye. And we call it hemosiderin. The pigments from your blood, which is leaked out of your vessels, may end up increasing your dark circles. So you can damage the skin around the eye if you're too rough with it. So whichever of the mentioned solutions that you use to remove it, you usually take it in a little piece of cotton and you keep it. You allow the bonds in the makeup to actually break. So you keep it there for 2 seconds. That's enough, 2-3 seconds. And then it should come off in one swipe. If it doesn't come off, then the next day when you're removing, you need to keep it a little longer. So it comes off in one swipe. Maximum, you turn the cotton and do a second swipe. So the underneath, whatever is left, is also coming off neatly. That's as gentle as you should get. Once you remove the colored makeup, another whatever little cotton bit to remove your lip makeup off, the rest you can just use one and just wipe the whole thing off and wash it off. Or you may not even want to remove the rest. This must be your most stubborn one. Then just remove this. Then you wash it off with a face wash. Don't forget to take away the makeup from your neck, behind the ears, especially people who have skin irritation, eczema, seborrhea. Make sure this entire space is nicely cleaned out. So this is what you do. That's how you remove your makeup.
How do you apply moisturizer adequately?
Like this. So that's the worst way that most people show you, that put it here, do this and put it off. As less as you touch your facial skin, it's more beneficial for you. One, it is less irritant. Two, the right way is to wash your hands first. So wash your hands first, then take your cream. If you have a pot of cream, don't dig your finger. Usually keep a spatula, which is neat, and just take it from it. But otherwise, if you don't have a spatula, don't know to meet in it, take it from the edge of it a little with clean hands. Digging your finger in and making a mess out of it, right? You don't want to be introducing bacteria, dirt into that jar which you're going to close and keep. Especially in a place like India, which is temperate, hot and humid. You don't want to be introducing things into it. So you just take it generally from the side, keep it clean. And you take that little moisturizer on a clean face. You end up just literally put your hair back, clean your face, and at the clean face, just literally dot it everywhere, depending on how much is your skin dry and how much you want to take. You just put that big a blob and that many dots. And then with 2 fingers of both the hands, you can nicely, gently just apply it everywhere. Put it on your neck and you're done. Never use so much on your hand that half your hand is only getting absorbing it. What's the whole point? Unless you're using an oil and you want a nice massage and you're doing something relaxing, use your palm. To apply something which is for the skin, 2 fingers, nicely gentle application is more than enough. That's one. An extension of this question that I want to answer is how you keep your cosmetics. You said, why when I put the finger in? I have a habit of telling my patients, get me all the cosmetics you've been using so far. One, of course, to understand what they're using. And 2, it's not that all the world's cosmetics, I know it by heart. So they'll tell me some name, I won't even know what it is. Unless I see the dabba and see the ingredients, I won't know what that is. So I tell them to bring everything. Third reason that I tell them to bring everything is to see how they've kept it. So I can educate them on that. Sometimes the tubes are so dirty, the creams are all flowing out and the rids have been on top of it, or the dabba is so dirty. So you need to keep your skincare really well. Clean it. If something excess comes out of the tube, wipe it off. And then you kind of screw it back in. So keeping your skincare creams very clean is a very, very important thing. Abroad, you get these miniature fridge where they end up putting it inside. But here, probably, if you can't, all of us do that. Keep it clean, keep it at a neat place, put it in a separate tray. So it's clean in that space. So that's very important.
I want to ask you about hair as well. Dandruff is a really
Yeah.
common problem. What is the solution for dandruff? There are off-the-shelf
Anti-dandruff
shampoos, anti-dandruff shampoo.
Yeah, off the shelf.
Any of
also you
them?
can take any of them. I'll tell you where the problem lies. You use anti-dandruff shampoo once and then you think dandruff will be gone. Or 3 times and you think dandruff will be gone. Now, what is dandruff? It is just an yeast. A yeast which is anyway there on my head, your head, on everybody's head. But when that yeast grows beyond what it should be, overgrows, is where it becomes a common term called dandruff. Now, that happens when your scalp is dirty, when there is excessive oil production in your scalp. Maybe there is a compromise even in your food, your excessive sugar intake. All of this can lead to overgrowth of that yeast, which then becomes inflammatory. And that yeast feeds on the stearic acid, which is the fat from your own oil glands of the scalp. So simply keeping your scalp clean sometimes will take care of the dandruff. You just have to wash your hair every, let's say, alternate days. It's feeling greasy, wash it alternate days. So if you keep your scalp nice and squeaky clean, I'm not saying over dry and scrub it out, but nice and clean and crisp, your dandruff might just go off on its own, or that excessive growth of yeast will come back to normal growth on its own. 2, if it is little excess, it's gone beyond a way where you need solution to it, use any anti-dandruff shampoo from over the counter, but use it consistently. Again, when you put an anti-dandruff shampoo, you lather, put it on the scalp, leave it there for 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes, I'm exaggerating, 3 to 4 minutes, let's say, on the scalp, for that ingredient in that, for that yeast killing chemical in that to work on you. You don't put and remove it immediately. Work on you. And consistently keep it going at least for 3 weeks or a month for you to actually see the result. And then you need to make sure you have the scalp oils reduced. Do all of those solutions so that the dandruff doesn't grow right back again. And wash your hair regularly. So what is gotten rid is kept at bay. That you need to do. If there is excessive dandruff, then you may have to meet your dermatologist to make sure she gives you a longer stay lotion. So you apply the same lotion which was in your shampoo, same ingredients, and keep it overnight. So then it has enough time to work on the yeast. Now, if it is even more severe, you may need an oral tablet to kill that yeast,
Right.
along with application. So it's important for you to meet doctor. If it is little, first try the initial solutions that I said.
There's a lot of talk about, this city has hard water, or this city has water makes a difference.
Big difference on skin and hair. Most of my little girls who go to London to study, all of them come back, doc, my skin is really bad. The city of London has hard water. So it is difficult. They come back with bad skin and bad hair. Hard water is so full of chemicals, right? It sits, it's like a silt. It sits on your hair, it sits on your skin, and it keeps irritating. There's inflammation there. So that causes a lot of hair and skin damage. So wherever kids are and you know that there is hard water, again, Google search, you will know the particle
kind of
size
water,
of pollution and your water there, both. So then you have this, Amazon has these beautiful spout things that you can attach to the output of water there itself, which would cleanse the water and bring it out. There are jugs, jugs which actually
Filter out.
that. So these are easier things that a student traveling abroad can end up using. Very important to this. First thing, get to a city, figure this out, do it before it ruins your skin. And until then, for your face and hair wash, use the water from the drinking water space, not the water from the shower. So that will really help. Yes, hard water matters.
So Turkey has now become a global hub for hair transplant surgery.
Yeah.
There's like an entire package where it includes your tickets, your hotel, the whole procedure gets done, and then you fly back home. Have you heard about it? Are they better than everybody else in doing this? Why is everybody going to
You are
Turkey?
hearing about it now because thanks to all the internet.
Yes.
This Turkey package was there since 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There were Turkey doctors flying into Bombay to do things. A team of doctors from Turkey used to fly down.
But why? Are they better at
At
it?
that time, I would say they may have been better at it. Like I keep saying, medicine is practice. So at that time, they had so many takers. And people from rest of the world came down to probably Turkey and got it done. And they had so much practice and they definitely were better, faster, quicker, less complications, great at what they did. But now there are fabulous Indian doctors. Why would you want to go to Turkey? There are fabulous Indian doctors who have dedicated their practice for only hair transplant. I would rather go to someone there. And in India today, there is so much awareness that every third person has gotten a hair transplant done. So the practice of those surgeons, like I said, has grown so much and therefore they've done so many cases. So therefore they're brilliant. So you don't necessarily need to travel today out of the country for anything.
Last question.
Go ahead.
What is your advice for everyone at home watching this? Should we have a dermatologist or a specialist who we see on a regular basis? At what point do we should we start seeing a dermatologist? Or do we only go when we start to see an issue that is not going away with Chandan and Haldi? Like what is the, what's the set procedure?
I don't think there is a set procedure, but because we are in an age where there's information overload and continuous bombarding, like earlier, if you had an acne, did you even notice? But I'm thinking a few hair fell, a few acne here and there. It wasn't traumatizing us and nor did we notice it. But today there is an information overload. Therefore, there is so much attention to everything that's going
Every
wrong.
detail. Yeah.
And then your temptation to immediately search a solution is so much more. So I would say all you mothers out there or fathers out there, bring your teenage kids to a dermatologist. So they're guided the right way. Don't wait for something to go wrong or her using some other thing from the internet or skin getting sensitive to bring them over. Bring them, help them. It's like sex education. Initially it was such a taboo and nobody brought them. Today it's in school, it's everywhere. So people are not waiting for things to go wrong and then go to someone else. So an aesthetic consultation or a dermatology consultation needn't be for the later. Get it done for the awareness from the horse's mouth. So they know the right thing and they know what to do, why not to do, or what to start doing. So please get a general initial consultation as early as you can. So you get your act right, you get to know what it is. Like simple thing like a dandruff. No, simple thing like should I wash my hair every day? That's a question. Does hair wash, shampooing lead to hair fall? A question that I always end up getting. I'm like, no. Hygienic scalp has never led to hair fall. Unhygienic scalp will lead to hair fall because it's inflammatory. So my point to all these simple questions, go to an expert, ask. So you're not living, thinking something and listening to something who's not qualified enough. So that's number one. Two, the minute you have an issue, go to a doctor. Otherwise, that's the second way. Don't try to self-treat it for a while. Listen to influencers for a while to treat it or anything to treat it for a while. And then go to a doctor after destroying to a bit because going back is always difficult. It's a skin, like you keep saying. It's not fashion that you can just rub it off.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to undo. So go when you have the first problem. So you figure out what is right. These are two places that you can end up going to a dermatologist, I think. 2 stages that would be right for you to go to a dermatologist.
So fundamentally, everybody's skin is different. Everybody's hair is different.
Yeah.
Don't actually apply anything.
It's like your fingerprint. It's completely
without seeing a
different.
specialist who can tell you what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And can diagnose the underlying cause for whatever it is you're seeing on your face.
Yeah. Very important. And sometimes it's the simple things. And then you are only complexing it and complicating it. So it's a simple thing. So that coming out from an expert's chamber may make more sense to your children, to yourself, than otherwise.
Dr. Rashmi Shetty, thank you so much for giving me this time and for having this conversation. It's been a pleasure.
How sweet. Thank you so much. And now I'm telling you, we'll do a Kannada episode. All of you say yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.